I think in an ideal world, if you're a company without a data strategy, I guess in simple terms, you should really try and get one. And they're not that difficult to actually develop. The DMA, for instance, has some excellent best practice guidelines here. When we look at a company that hasn't got a data strategy, we kind of work through a roadmap, I suppose, of the things to check. So I would suggest if you haven't got a strategy, first of all, look at doing an audit of the current state of your data. And by that I mean you need to look at the structure of the data, the fields with which you're actually collecting information. And look to make sure that those fields are properly populated, so you've got a kind of a complete record. So many of the data audits that we do, we find that 3/4 of the fields are populated, but they haven't got postcodes, or are all kind of collected in the wrong columns. So there's quite a lot of work often to be done, just in terms of getting the data quality right in the first instance. We would always suggest to companies that they do a regular suppression and update program. As I mentioned earlier on, the level of gonaways, even in a file that's maybe just a year old, can be quite high. So it's important that you do a suppression run before you actually use that data. Make sure that you're not sending data to people who are bereaved or who don't want to get your mailings. And then also look at an update program, because obviously there are good files on the market. NCOA is one example where once you've suppressed information, you can then get update information for new addresses. So that would be another thing that I would look to do as part of a strategy. I'd also encourage setting quality targets for data. In other words, making sure that that data is refreshed and updated on a regular basis. So each time you run an audit, you see that the data is now 96, 97% accurate, rather than quite often we find less than 50%. I'd also make sure that you look at compliance to data regulations. Those regulations are changing all the time, and it's important that companies are up to date with what they are, making sure that they're operating within the law. Another element of our kind of strategy, if you like, would be looking at what happens to data, particularly if it leaves the building. So is that data seeded? Have you put in trackers, if you like, to make sure that if that data goes missing, you can actually find out that it's gone missing by, seeing that the data's been used for somebody else. I think another thing I would do is make sure, if at all possible, that you can validate the data at the point that that data is being captured. Again, lots of companies don't do that, but it is, again, fairly easy to do if you've got, again, some quite simple address qualification systems in the background. You can, again, make sure that that data is up to date. And that actually helps a lot if you ask people where they were in their previous address. Again, lots of companies don't make use of that as an opportunity. That really does cut down fraud. And I guess last but by no means least, I'd look at seeing how you can get data valued as an asset, so it actually comes onto your balance sheets. And again, there are ways of valuing asset in the same way as many companies would value their brand. We're actually suggesting that you also value data as an asset, put a number against it. That can be extremely useful for things like business cases. So those would be a number of things that I would suggest companies look at if they don't have a data strategy.